Welcome to Ellevate Louisiana's November Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting. I'm Julie Stokes, founder and CEO of Ellevate. For today's discussion, we're joined by Veneeth Iyengar, who serves as Louisiana's Executive Director of ConnectLA, the Office of Broadband and Connectivity, leading the state's $1.6 billion effort to close the digital divide by 2028. Under the leadership of the administration, he coordinates broadband expansion all across all levels of government, helping to connect 1.7 million residents to high-speed internet. A recognized leader in economic development, Veneeth has received numerous awards for public service and innovation and serves on several healthcare and research boards dedicated to improving outcomes and opportunity across Louisiana. Veneeth also graduated from Leadership Louisiana with me back in the class that lasted a long time, otherwise known as the best class of 2020. That's why we lasted so long, because we got kind of interrupted by COVID.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Veneeth, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So with that, let me hand it over to you to get us started.
Well, thanks, Julie, and really appreciate getting in front of all of you. I don't have a presentation because I felt it probably made better sense just to have a dialogue on where we started and where we are today. And it's, probably for another conversation, Julie, it's been, it's been a saga, right? I've learned a lot about politics. I've learned a lot about what happens at the federal, state, and local level. You would think that solving someone's need at a local level wouldn't be as difficult as it is, but that's where we are as a community nowadays, right? But from a broadband perspective, I wanted to share it as really a highlight and a key win from a policy perspective and also from an execution perspective in Louisiana versus other states, because I know we love to compare ourselves to other states and why aren't other states doing, why aren't we doing what other states are doing? I'll tell you frankly, in broadband connectivity as a singular policy issue, we started effectively at the same time as every state, okay? The 50 states and 6 territories that are receiving federal funding, and we're way ahead of these other states. And I'll walk you through what that means. But let me just sort of recap where we were 5 years ago. So, and where we are today. So, as you're aware, Julie, and the folks in the room, March of 2020, I think the pandemic started, and then everyone said, "Look, we needed to solve this digital divide." Legislation was created to create the law Office of Broadband. As you're aware, Julie, it is easy to create legislation, harder to fund it. Office was created in 2020, and Jay Darden and Governor John Bel Edwards then said, "Hey, Veneeth, can you lead this office?" I said, "I'm happy to, but under certain conditions," right? A, I want to be able to pick my own team. B, we can't solve the digital divide in just 1 year's time. We're going to need really we need effectively 3 years of startup capital to get things moving. And I remember the conversation was, how much capital do you need? And Jay was like, "Look, I'm going to give you $1.5 million over 3 years." And so if you really think about it, the governor had a little money that he set aside. Kate Brumley set aside some money, and then Kim Hunter-Reid set some money. So effectively, those three were our shareholders.
Did you mean 1.5 million over
3 years?
500,
Yes.
or 1.5,
Yes.
1.5? Okay.
Yeah, and at any time, ask questions. It was basically 1.5 over 3 years.
Yeah.
But think about, we were legislatively capped when the office was created to only having 4 people. So an office of 4 with a budget of $1.5 million over 3 years to solve a problem impacting 1.7 million Louisianans.
Right.
Right, but it's a fun story. So I said,
Yeah.
"Sure, okay, sure, Governor, we're gonna figure it out. Come hell or high water, we'll figure it out." Mind
I have
you,
a question, Veneeth.
yes.
My question is this one, and I remember we had this conversation a while back, and refresh my memory because it's been a while. The 1.5, that's not the federal funding that was received. This is just for your office to be set
Yeah,
up.
it's like I need a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Right. Okay. So
My 3 other it
Yeah.
was basically we needed paid, it's basically to cover the expenses of the office.
Right.
It's like you go to a bank and you're like, I need $1 million to cover operating expenses. That's
This was an Ellevate-sized operation.
Yeah, I mean, it still is. I mean, if you think about it,
Yeah.
we still are capped at 4 people, which is
Yeah.
why, folks, it was so important when I mentioned this to the governor that it was important for me to select my own team because this is such the lack of connectivity has become a very personal issue, not just for us, but in the state, throughout the states. When you talk to people throughout the state, they're going to complain about a bunch of things, but they're going to really complain about the lack of connectivity and how it's prevented their ability to become successful in life. And so and so we needed to operate as a team with a sense of urgency. We needed we were highly determined as a team. As a culture in our office, the way we've created the culture is, look, I'm going to hire smart people. You don't need to have broadband background, but as long as you have passion and a commitment and you're willing to run through brick walls for Louisianians, that for me is the three biggest characteristics that I need in a colleague of ours. Um, I have personally visited, and I know Leslie Durham's on the call, so she's probably visited many more. But personally, I have visited 107 cities, towns, and villages throughout Louisiana, and so we have seen how important it is for connectivity to be had in a lot of these markets and a lot of these places. And it's also important for our team members to actually go and appreciate outside of Baton Rouge what the problem statements and challenges are. So $1.5 million over 3 years. And the governor, and I said, look, and I told Jay and I told the governor, I said, look, if we're adding enough value and if we're returning if we're generating a return on investment, then trust me, in 3 years, I'm going to ask for a little bit more help. And so they're like, okay, you got it. The other thing I asked both of them was organizationally, our office, and if you go to every other state, organizationally, the Office of Broadband sits in economic development. Years ago, I made it as one of the conditions that this office sits within a division administration, just because of the amount of money and because it's going to blend with politics and legislators. I needed someone at that time like Jay Darn to sort of counsel me on how to work and deal with legislators. And given, he had run through the legislative traps and being Senate Finance Chair and so on and so forth, it was important from that perspective. So this is the problem statement. As I said, 1.7 million Louisianians didn't have connectivity 5 years ago. So in my data sheet, it's basically 425,000. It's 424,619 households and small businesses that did not have connectivity in Louisiana. That's a ton of people.
Yeah.
That's a ton of places that have been impacted. And so I started the office March of 2021. And then the governor's like, hey, you're going to have some money from the American Rescue Plan to spend. And it was 176 million. And so rather than over rotate and really come up with the perfect policy, we just said, look, let's look at what some other states are doing at the time that had some smaller broadband programs, and let's create a grant program around that. Okay, so let's take a look at what they've done and then quickly execute and run a grant program around the 176 million. And that's what we've done. We took the $176 million, we ran a grant program, and we're going to connect by Q1 of next year, if not sooner, over 60,000 households and small businesses throughout Louisiana with those dollars.
How many?
It's over 60,000. And so Julie, what that effectively means when we say connected, we award dollars to an internet service provider to go build, and I'll give you an example. In Leslie's hometown of St. Joseph, right in Tensas, we awarded AT&T to build there. AT&T will then say, okay, I've completed the project. I'm now requesting my reimbursement. We then send technical people out to the field to verify the work is actually done. And once the work is actually done, that's only when we cut a check. And so I've got a spreadsheet that lists all of the projects, statuses, and so on and so forth. And so we're grateful that 95% of the projects are actively under construction or is complete, and we're now doing the technical audits. In fact, Tuesday of next week in Leesville, Louisiana, we're doing a ribbon cutting of a project that's going to connect over 2,000 people. December 1st in Avoyelles, we're going to do a ribbon cutting of a project that's going to connect over 7,000 households. In Grant Parish, LaSalle. So we're now in the ribbon cutting, celebrating. Now people have connectivity. And this is the headline statement that I want to leave, right? And I'll continue with sort of the next steps. In the first quarter of 2021, there were 424,619 locations, addresses, households, and small businesses that were not connected. That number has actually dropped to 126,000 that are remaining, which means over the last 4 years, we've connected almost 260,000 households and small businesses with connectivity. And so I know there was a little advocate article yesterday about, oh, we're still a bit, or a couple of weeks ago, that we're a little bit below average. I mean, that data wasn't, I didn't, it was ironic that they wrote a broadband article, but they didn't talk to me about it. But nonetheless, our broadband penetration rate in Louisiana in the first quarter of 2021 was 77%, which means 77% of Louisianans could get access to internet. Right now, it's at 90%. And why, you're like, a question might be, wow, it's taken 5 years to go from 77 to 90%. This 23%, right, are the most difficult locations to get to. This 23% are the most expensive locations to get to. This 23%, if not for the federal funds, would be forever lost. Okay? There would be no desire by the AT&Ts and Charters or Comcast or small companies. They had zero desire, frankly, folks, to connect people that lived in Tensas Parish, that lived in Grant or Plaquemines or et cetera, because they were focused just on high dense areas, higher return. There was zero desire for them to go to those markets. But because we've been pretty efficient, ruthlessly efficient in how we're creating a free market system, we've actually created the mechanisms for these companies to apply for our funds, avail of our funds, and to successfully build out.
So, because they're not monopolies, so you can't make them.
Yeah, they're not monopolies. You can't make them. However, in certain cases, they've exhibited monopolistic behavior through, hey, I won't encroach in your turf if you don't encroach in mine. Okay.
Yeah, right.
And
They kind of, yeah.
So that's a good, so we took this 176 million happily ever after. We could have been very happy and successfully run the program. November of 2021, the infrastructure bill gets signed. We started lobbying hard for our allocation. And June of 2023, we received the 8th largest allocation in the country, 10th largest on a per capita basis. So we actually fought hard for that money. What we received from the infrastructure bill is $1.35 billion. So money, and I've mentioned this before, money has never been an issue. I know in infrastructure challenges, if your infrastructure backlog is 50 billion in Louisiana, for example, state might give 5%, feds might give you 5%, and that's where the politics and horse trading happens, like prioritizing one area versus the other. In broadband, it's the complete opposite. We've sort of flipped the model, and we received 1.35 billion. So
Yeah.
So we received the allocation. August 19, 2024, Governor Landry, we have a big press conference, and the governor's like, we're going to launch the competitive grant program to once and for all eliminate the digital divide. It was August 19, 2024. November, so we run a process. It was a very efficient free market process. November 18th of 2024, the governor issues a press release saying we have announced the results. And it was going to be 95% of the remaining locations, which was 140,000 locations, where we're going to receive fiber infrastructure. Over 90% was going to be buried infrastructure, which was important to the governor and important, frankly, to all of us. If you have the money to spend, just bury the infrastructure. Over 90% of the dollars were going to go to Louisiana companies, which we didn't award Louisiana companies. They just won in the bidding process. And because we did such an efficient job, we actually freed up $550 million that the governor then wanted to spend. Look, so out of our 1.35 billion, 750 million would be focused on infrastructure, and the balance we could spend based on the federal statute on things, and this is where it becomes interesting, things where connectivity is going to improve people's lives. So the governor said, we need to address maternal, behavioral, and chronic disease. So we were going to use the balance of the money. We were going to use $100 million, and we were going to allocate it to LDH to come up with a telehealth program to address maternal and behavioral health. The governor said, let's allocate $20 million to LSU Ag to impact 5,000 farmers with precision ag. Let's allocate $100 million to Susie Showen at LWC, or now Louisiana Works, to create the country's foremost workforce development program in the country. Let's allocate $100 million to CADE to continue to create a high dosage tutoring program. Okay. Let's and $50 million to board regents. So the governor wanted to go all in terms of improving healthcare outcomes, improving small business concerns. We were going to allocate 60 million. You know, LED has an LA.io program. We actually, a little secret was that we were actually the funders of that program because we created so much efficiency on the bidding process. So we submitted all of these results to the feds, like saying, this is how we're going to spend the money, blah, blah, blah. December of 2024. We got approved on January 12th of 2025. So the Fed said, you've been approved. But another agency, which is supposed to approve our budget so that we could start to draw down funds, did not do it before January 20th. So January 20th happens. Governor sends a letter to then, he was going to be confirmed, Secretary Lutnick, saying, hey, look, we could get the president a win in the first 100 days. We could put shovels in the ground. We didn't do any of the kinds of things that, you know, through your executive orders, like all the stuff around DEI, all the things that a president's executive, we didn't incorporate any of that stuff. We want to give you all a win. January becomes February, becomes March, becomes April, becomes May. We keep lobbying, we keep fighting for the, you know, I started going to the White House. I'm like, look, we can get you started, right? May becomes June 6th. And on June 6th of this year, Secretary Lutnick of Commerce, which all of our broadband funds fall under, he basically says everyone needs to start all over. And every state needs to start all over. We were by first state to be approved. Louisiana, what took you 18 months to do, you now have to rebid all 1.35 billion, but you have to do it in 90 days. So I'm not going to give you a year. I'm going to give you 90 days. So the governor's like, Veneeth, you've got 90 days to figure this stuff out again. So then on June 6th, we started cranking. We ran through another bidding exercise on our 1.35 billion, and the results were good. We resubmitted our results back to the feds on August 15th, and I think we're close to getting approval again. And the results are this. Before June 6th, out of the 1.35 billion, we were going to spend 748 million on infrastructure, 95% fiber, and then the balance would be spent on really cool things that I think would have really accelerated Louisiana's position in a number of different ways, okay, economic development wise, et cetera.
Yeah.
Now the results are this. Out of the 1.35 billion, the cost of building infrastructure has dropped. So we created an additional $250 million in efficiency. So the cost of infrastructure is going to be $500 million, which means we have freed up $857 million that are remaining. Okay. Instead of 95% fiber, it'll be 80% fiber. And then some folks will get Elon Musk. Some folks will get cable like Comcast in North Louisiana, et cetera. Now, so September 8th, we submitted our results August 15th. September 8th, Governor Landry sends another letter to Secretary Lutnick saying, Secretary Lutnick, we did such an efficient job. We did an efficient job before. We've done even a more efficient job through our broadband office, that we do not want the balance of the money, which is $857 million, to go back to Treasury. We need that money to stay in Louisiana, to help with farmers, to help with healthcare outcomes, workforce development, K through 12, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like the use of, now it's one thing, folks, to get people connected, but now if you can get them connected, which we will, and then your healthcare provider says, go home and let's do a telehealth visit, let's do a checkup. Instead of you sort of taking an hour ride to go see your maternal doctor, right? Your OB, you can do it from your home. That is very powerful stuff, because you're now using connectivity to drive societal outcomes. And what the governor is now saying is, with the 857 million, which might be 2 or 3% of the state's operating budget, let us use those dollars to advance a number of different priorities that the administration has. We've talked about healthcare, ag, et cetera. So that's where we are right now, Julie, is, I mean, there's more to the story, but we, that's where we are, is we're seeking any day now approval to at least get started on the infrastructure side. Once we get that approval, we could probably put shovels in the ground this year. And our goal is by the end of 27, at least every single Louisianian will have connectivity. It will be affordable. And that's what we're trying to shoot for. I know
So you lost a year or two.
I'll tell you, in dealing with the feds, we have lost probably 19 months. We could be 19 months ahead further if not for federal challenges, both previous and current.
19 months.
So
Oh, yeah. Boy, I tell you, just that one person not approving something that had already kind of been approved before the changeover in federal administrations cost 19 months of families not having internet.
yeah, it's but I'll tell you, Julie, I've been around, I travel a ton around the state. I was in Webster Parish. We're now going to a bunch of other places. I think people appreciate when I mean, people have visceral reactions on why things are not happening. But when you walk them through the sausage making, it illuminates, they begin to understand the challenges that folks have when it comes to taking federal policy, translating to state, and execution.
Yeah.
They appreciate those conversations. They appreciate the honesty. But
Yeah.
we see light at the end of the tunnel very soon, and people are actually getting connected. So
Because we had a lot of awards, right? We had gotten, and meaning like we were the fastest, we were the most efficient, we had been really
yes.
amazing, right? And so now we're just kind of stuck. Is everybody stuck the way we're stuck right now?
Well, everyone's stuck, but we're usually the canary in the coal mine in terms of federal policy and state policy. Like I'll tell you, 45% or 45 other states, rather, not 45%, have probably copied language in terms of policy and how we've executed they've taken what we've done and have adapted on their own.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah. That's a
testament.
nod.
I mean, it's always just a deference to what does Louisiana think. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
even at the federal level, they often tell us, hey, can we use y'all as a guinea pig to test some concepts and ideas out, which we've always been if we could be a sandbox and to help the feds early on, then it makes it easy on the back end.
Right. Yeah. So one of our members asked if you could repeat the numbers.
Yeah.
And is this connectivity by fiber or satellite? So I think you had listed out. Yeah, you can go ahead and.
So for when we started, let me just sort of top line numbers. 4 years ago when we started, or 2021, 77% of the state was connected. we're now at 90% of the state that's been connected, which means there were 424,000 or so locations, and the location's a physical address, like 123 Main Street, 123 Smith Street, whatever. But there were 424,000 addresses that were unserved and underserved 5 years ago. We've knocked that number down to 140,000.
140,000 locations need to be connected.
Which we will use the balance of the infrastructure bill. We will use the infrastructure bill money to finish connecting those folks once and for all.
Once the money's released to us,
Yeah.
because that's the money that's stuck right now. Now, one thing I'd like to understand a little bit better is you had mentioned the money with the efficiencies that that could be applied to certain projects, like 500 for
Yes,
workforce and 200 for DOE. So what would that do? How is that going to be used? And maybe you can take
let
it
me,
a level.
I'll tell you what's happening at the federal level, and then
Okay.
Senator Joni Ernst out of Iowa has a bill that she wants to introduce to claw all these dollars back.
That what?
Wants to doge these dollars and claw these dollars back. Okay, like Texas is sitting on 2 billion. We're at 857 million. Arkansas is at 600 plus million. Mississippi is at 500, 600 million. So Senator Joni Ernst wants to claw these dollars back. Senator Roger Wicker, chairman of Armed Services, from Mississippi, has a bill for the states to keep these dollars under certain conditions. Okay, we obviously don't want and the governor's letter was very clear in saying we don't want to return any of these dollars. But I'll tell you, the way it would work mechanically is, like in the past, what we were thinking was that $100 million would go to LDH. LDH would then have to come up with metrics and a plan on how they would execute those dollars and who they would partner with. The beauty of these dollars, I'll tell you, is that it's not like we had 20 years to spend these dollars. We only have 4 years to spend these dollars, which means I remember the governor telling me last year, he's like, Veneeth, look, outcomes. It's your throat to choke. And what he was saying was, if you're going to invest $100 million, if you're going to allocate $100 million of your broadband funds to LDH, we can't spend 80% of it on an admin. Okay, for example, just throwing out an example. But B, we can't have these very long longitudinal, we'll see outcomes in year 10 kind of thing. Which means behaviorally, these state agencies would have to actually do something that they haven't really done before, which is, I've got a bunch of money, I need to quickly show outcomes. I need to sort of operate like the Office of Broadband, which is, let's focus on a singular issue, dive deep, let's not make perfect the enemy of good. Let's start to generate the kinds of outcomes, because as you're aware, politically now, people don't have patience, right? And they will throw you out of office if they feel nothing's getting done. And so the money would go to state agencies through an interagency agreement, whatnot. The agencies would then spell out the metrics in terms of how they would then measure outcomes, and then they would run their own competitive grant process.
So if and I think it was 500,000 for LDH for maternal and behavioral telehealth.
It was 100 million for LDH.
Oh, okay.
It was 100 million for LDH, 100 million for Louisiana Workforce Commission.
Okay.
100 million to DOE. So I always joke with Cade, because Cade invested $500,000 with us, and now we're returning 100 million to him, right? So in terms of return on investment, 20 million to LSU Ag to impact farmers, 50 million Board of Regents, 40 million LCTCS, Community College System. And it was 20 million to the Department of Corrections to get people who are formerly incarcerated job opportunities. It would have, and 60 million to LED. All of these things would have increased Louisiana's GDP by 2 to 3 billion in just a 4-year period. It would increase revenue of small businesses by over $500 million. It would create 10,000 jobs. And this is as a run up this is over a 4-year build out. Imagine in 4 years, once everyone's connected, then those numbers actually go up quite a bit.
Yeah. So, okay. So, like, give me an example of what you would use that for, like, at any of those, like for LDH, since we care about maternal and behavioral
Yeah.
health and yeah.
So the problem statement right now is, I mean, we're pretty atrocious when it comes to our maternal rankings, right? I mean,
Yeah, we really are. Yeah.
we're terrible. Part of the challenge is folks that live in rural parts of the state. You're not gonna necessarily find. You might be lucky to find an OB that's on any consistent basis in Kentwood, Louisiana, or in Delhi, Louisiana, or Iowa, Louisiana, right? Um, and so if you're a pregnant mom that lives in some of those places, and let's say you're a single mom that has a job that you can't really afford to leave to go to your OB visit, what happens when you have maternal challenges? You end up in the ER, right? what and so what telehealth would do, right? What connectivity would do would be to displace the need for someone who's an
Yeah.
expected mother to go to the ER for every little single thing, right? So now with
Right.
connectivity, you just hop on, talk to your OB, understand what's going on, and if she's like, yeah, you need to come and visit me, then you go visit. Otherwise, if things are status quo and things are shaping, and moving in the right direction, then that's the case, right? It's very, I'll tell you, Julie, it's very tactical things that we would get involved in.
But how would like Department of Health use it? Like,
What they would do is they would take the money, right? And
mhm.
they would run their own sub-grant program where providers, let's say federally qualified health centers, providers, nonprofits, would apply for the funds to then execute their vision on how to address a telehealth maternal challenge.
Okay, exactly. Okay, cool. And so I want to go ahead and open it up, but first, I want Wendy to come on, and I know she had a couple of questions, and I'd rather if she got to ask them herself because Wendy Weileman is she's the chair of this committee for broadband connectivity, and we greatly appreciate her. And I don't think we adequately introduced her at the beginning of the show, so I just wanted to real quickly do that and let her go ahead and ask some questions.
Oh, thank you, Julie. And thanks, Veneeth. This is very informative. And my background, I work for Bearcom, used to be Tomba Communications, but I'm a Motorola Solutions representative. So I handle a lot of, radio systems on
Hmm.
the state LWIN system, the Louisiana Wireless
Yep.
or Infrastructure Network for police and fire. And we also handle broadband. We do private broadband for we can build out private broadband systems for counties and parishes as well. But so it's very interesting to me. And a couple of my questions, because I deal with a lot of large projects as well, as I wanted to understand and make sure I understood that correctly. So the first federal funding was 176 million, correct? And then we were able to fix a certain percentage. And then we
Correct.
got awarded more recently another
Correct.
1.3 billion more to
Correct.
fix the remaining 10% of the
Right.
households that don't have access. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Um, well, I guess that's a good thing because they saw it work, so they gave you even more this time.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was some nuance. We A couple of years ago, the chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, she and I had a chat, and she's like, Vineet, I need you to do something that most other states won't do, which is challenge our federal maps, which will dictate the formulas. So we did, and that got us the extra money. But yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And I guess I have two questions about. A first question is in regards to like the providers that were awarded, to be able to build this infrastructure out. Is there a contingency for them that if during this during the bid process, was it, hey, you have to build it out but you also have to maintain it, you have to keep this active for a certain period of time?
Yeah, the period of performance is 10 years.
Okay, so it's 10 years. Okay. And I
So
just say that because a lot of times customer, or I say my customers get federal funding and they buy something and they don't maintain it over a period of time. So,
Yeah,
um,
so the period performance is 10 years.
okay.
But part of Wendy, which is important, is we went through a pretty extensive pre-qualifications process. And then so companies, internet service providers like the Cajun Broadbands of the world, the Sky Riders out of Columbia, Louisiana, AT&T's, Swift Fiber. I mean, they went through a pretty extensive pre-qualifications process. And then the ones that we felt were low risk, we allowed them to bid. So we looked at their financials. We looked at a bunch of different things because that's the other thing is execution risk is really important. And what we
Mhm.
don't want are a bunch of companies to fail, default, and then it's not good. So we went through a
Right.
pretty extensive process to ensure we vetted these companies.
Um, so 10 years. Okay. And my last question is kind of twofold, but I mean, I don't want to assume because I really don't know. The last 10% of households in these areas, I'm sure they're very rural areas, I'm assuming, but have we considered whether or not, let's just say they get the funding, we award them the funding to build out infrastructure for this last percentage of households.
Mhm.
But what if it's not very rewarding for the vendor in the period of time where they
Yeah,
don't have enough, they're not assigning up enough vendors they built it,
customers.
but no one's buying the
Yeah.
subscriptions.
So that's a great question. So we're a CapEx program. So we're going to pay the capital expenses for a company to go into areas that they would have never have gone into. Number
Okay.
one. Number two is when we created project areas, this is what we did. We created the project areas in a way that blended households that we felt was going to generate a high ROI
Okay.
with households that we felt were not going to generate a high
It's a
ROI.
mix.
Okay. And what we told the companies was it's all or nothing. Part of the challenge when you go to rural Louisiana is the cherry picking phenomenon, which is an ISP will go to Minden, Louisiana, or they'll go to uh, some place that's there's a higher concentration of locations. But then if you live 10 miles away from Minden, you're going to be out of luck. Okay. So in order to solve that last 10% problem, we needed to ensure that we mix when we create the project areas, we circle the areas that are going to make money for the companies with those that are not, so that they come up with a reasonable ROI. And I'll tell you, for the first 176 million, we asked the companies to define project areas. We knew exactly what was going to happen. They were going to cherry pick, but we needed to get started. We
And
then
did they? I'm sure they did.
Yeah, I mean they build. I mean, like for example, in Tensile Parish, and Leslie would know better. Look, we wanted AT&T. We awarded AT&T to build in St. Joseph, in Tensile, which is great. The people in St. Joseph are thrilled that they're getting high speed connectivity. It's the places that are outside of St. Joseph that we needed to take care of. So that's why we blended the project areas. The second time around, we created the project areas. We didn't allow the ISPs to do it. Right. So, and why did we create the project areas? Because when we go and travel around the state, that's the feedback we got from people. There was abject fear from people that said, am I ever going to get connectivity? Am I going to ever be included? Okay. Am I forever going to be bum out of luck? And so we took that and we were reflective on that feedback. And we created those project areas to reflect that.
I think that's very smart. You blended like very high return on
Expensive.
investment and low, and so they came into a middle ground. But
Correct.
my last question was this. Have y'all thought about maybe some of the access funds going to a period of time to like a pool to allow low residents who can't afford it to be able to utilize that
Yeah.
money for subscription, so that the whole purpose of them being having the ability to use it and actually using it?
Yeah. So right now the problem is there are too many people in Louisiana that's overpaying for pretty garbage service. All right. I get calls every day. I get emails from people saying I'm paying $200 for mediocre and garbage service. We actually have a state law that says if you are a recipient of federal funds from the Office of Broadband and you're building in a rural community, what you offer in that rural community has to match what that same plan of speeds are in a community where there is competition. So what I'm getting anecdotally is, so I got a text a couple of weeks ago from maybe a couple of months ago from State Rep Gabe Furman, who's in LaSalle, I think Grant or LaSalle Parish, who said, Veneeth, I just wanted to provide this feedback. And what the feedback was, this resident who we're providing federal funds to, right, through an internet service provider, they're now paying $50 for fiber optic speed that they were once paying $200 for sub garbage optimal speeds. Okay. And what that family was now saying is, I'm now saving $150 a month, which means over the course of a year is pretty serious money, right? So I'm not only saving, but I'm also paying something substantially lower. And we have that state law to support that. Now, in a lot of places, $50 is still a lot. One of the conditions of our federal funds, the big 1.35 billion, is that unfortunately, what they're telling us at the federal level is that those companies cannot apply for additional federal funds to address an OPEX issue, which is to help pay for service.
Okay, so it's
To make it better.
infrastructure build only. Okay.
Now, I'll let those folks sort of lobby the feds, but we were told that that's a no.
Yeah, that's pretty unfortunate. Wendy, thank you so much. You had some great questions as well. Well, we really greatly appreciate it. And as you can see, Ellevate does a lot of online work.
Yes.
We have 6 of these a month. 6 committee meetings for our 6 committees a month, and they all hinge upon everybody's ability to do this. And we were very supportive of telehealth, and getting more access to people. And we're also, I sit on a higher education board, and how important it's going to be for our universities to thrive, to be able to do more online courses, because it's the way of the future for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people. So, just thank you. And I'm just so sorry that it's so difficult between administrations. And it's like why I literally hate politics. I love policy. And, good job.
I survived a gubernatorial transition.
Yeah.
I survived we survived a federal, there's stories behind that. Which one day I'll share with you about those experiences, which I don't think I'll ever, unless I run for office, which is not going to happen. I don't think I'll ever have a professional experience, and I've told that to my teammates, like this job. But most importantly, why I'm here is I'm having a ton of fun, even after 5 years. I don't let any of this stuff bother me or my teammates, and so we're committed to the cause.
Well, I've always been able to tell that you're kind of a purpose-driven person, and this really highlights it. So, we really appreciate you always being here to come talk to us about it. You've certainly been a good friend to Ellevate, and thank you for everything you're doing out there to reduce the digital divide.
All right, appreciate it, folks. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us and being part of the discussion, everyone. We hope that everyone has a great rest of their day. If you're interested in these types of policy talks, check us out on Ellevate Louisiana's website, where you can learn more about our events, our policy committees, advocacy efforts, and how to join. That website is ellevatela.org, ELLEVATELA.org. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.